Welcome to the Reddit library. Today, we'll be looking at r/AskReddit, where user decrypted_ asked, "People who grew up rich but turned out poor. What is your story?" Parents quit a good job because my dad got tired of the daily repeating pattern. It bored him too much to spend his life on it. That's how he went from lower middle class to homeless. My dad decided he needed a break for a while. He quit his job, disappeared for a year or so, and left us 3 kids, all minors, to fend for ourselves. Our mother had died years before, so we didn't have another parent to rely on. No drugs or alcohol was involved in his decision either. He just stopped being a parent one day. My grandparents were very wealthy, so they bought my parents a house and basically supported my family, even paying for my school tuition. I wasn't aware of this. Because of this, my parents were lazy and never really had jobs. They were always at home, and I didn't find any of this unusual. We had extravagant vacations, and I remember being given everything I had ever asked for. But my grandpa died when I was about 10, grandma following suit soon after, and all his kids started fighting over the money. I'm pretty sure they're still fighting. Anyway, soon, half the lights in our house didn't work, our TVs were all broken, and our cars broken down and barely usable. I was wearing the same uniform all throughout high school, and as a teenager I wore nothing but hand-me-downs. My allowance decreased instead of increased year by year. There were no more vacations, but my parents wasted the rest of their savings on appearing rich, buying fancy jewelry and clothes for themselves, and racking up credit card debt. Then they'd host parties for friends in expensive restaurants, and I'd feel so angry because back home we'd be eating nothing but canned food. It honestly scarred me so much that my only goal is to become financially stable, and I plan to stay employed without ever retiring because I don't want to be like them, jobless and stupid. Ironically, they've probably taught you financial responsibility really well, despite not understanding it themselves. Did you ever hear the tragedy of Darth Parent, the financially irresponsible? We were really well off in Korea until we moved to America. It seemed like a piece of cake for a family like mine to start life anew with enough financial backings. My father had worked hard for his family. In the first 2 years of our life in America, my parents were scammed by shady Korean immigration lawyers, twice. Blew all of their savings and emergency funds. We started from rock bottom again. I remember skipping 2 meals a day so we could have food to go around everyone. I also remember pulling the plug on the refrigerator because what's the point if there's nothing in it? We don't look back or talk about those times anymore. You could say that again. My wife's family got scammed by shady K-Town immigration lawyers too. Dad went to jail for housing fraud in 2010. I was in my teens and $10 million were seized. Went from $800,000 house to homeless in 4 days because our family didn't even know he'd been in court for 2 years. Oh geez dude, I feel so bad for your family at that time. What was it like after that? Went from ramshackle apartment to apartment. I was the class clown in all of my new schools that went home alone with no friends. Mainly because I never tried and didn't want people to see where I lived. Got good grades and went to a top 10 college for engineering. Tried to be social to make up for lost time. Joined a frat, got the stuff kicked out of me in hazing, and now I'm addicted to nicotine and probably alcohol. Hey man, just speaking from my experience, the smartest decision I ever made was quitting drinking, and I made it about 10 years later than I should have. It's really easy to lose entire decades, and once they're gone, you can't get them back. Most people with a healthy relationship with alcohol never stop to question if they have a drinking problem. So if it's even kind of in the back of your mind, please consider at least trying to take a break and reassess. Again, just speaking from my perspective, and everyone's journey in relationship to booze is different. My dad owned several very successful radio stations, then sold them all for several million while all the mega media companies were buying them up. We lived very comfortably for a while with a nice house and a vacation home right on the slopes of a major Colorado ski resort. He married a gold digger. Unfortunately, he bought it all with the money that relied on tech stocks. When the dot-com bubble burst, we lost everything. He tried to sue his broker for bad advice, but only won about $200K. He then declared bankruptcy and lost everything again. Our house sold for half of its worth. I have no idea what happened to the vacation home, but I assume something similar. His wife divorced him. My dad, brother, and I all split up to try and make it on our own. He ended up couch surfing with my mom's family while he got a real estate license. He is still paying alimony. My brother and I put ourselves through school, and we both have reasonable jobs now and are doing alright. Quite a story. I think it's good to learn these lessons early. My lawyer dad had a partner and they made great money for years. When I was 12, my dad went on his own and lost everything. Bankruptcy and divorce followed, a terrifying experience. We could no longer afford anything, but maybe it was all for the better. Instead of being spoiled brats, all 4 of us kids put ourselves through school and all did fine. We are still doing okay. I agree. I was well on my way to being a spoiled rich kid who expected everything to be handed to him. This was a huge wake-up call on how things actually are. Even with everything that happened, I still consider us pretty fortunate. We had family and friends that we were able to lean on to get by and help us all get on our feet. A lot of people don't have that. Well, not exactly rich, but my family was making a fair sum when I was a kid. Then there were mass layoffs and now we live paycheck to paycheck. It's not that we don't make enough money, it's just that my parents, with all the respect, are financial imbeciles. On the bright side, seeing them as an example of what not to do, I learned everything there is to learn about personal finance and a fair bit about business. On the stupid side, I have repeatedly explained to my parents all the necessary steps for them to get out of their financial problems, but as my mom put it, if I can't spend my money, then what's the point in even working? Like seriously, woman, you can spend your money, but not all of it. P.S. Sorry for the rant, had to get that off my chest. I grew up in a wealthy part of the United States, and everyone I went to school with had wealthy parents. It's amazing how many of these children are now mediocre at best and not high-income earners. There was an assumption that if they simply went to college, graduated, and got a job, they'd be as successful as their parents. When they weren't, they felt the world was unfair and became apathetic. My parents' neighborhood has homes in the 2 to 20 million range, and about 50% of the houses now have adult children in their 50s living with 80-year-old parents. I have a friend in her 50s who her life plan is to just wait for her inheritance. From various stories, I think she'll end up getting in the tens of millions, but for now, her apartment looks fit for a recent college grad. She works just hard enough to get by until then, sometimes needing her dad pay her bills. My dad was a millionaire, cheated on my mom. He had a mental breakdown, lost everything, still trying to get her back 10 years later. This is a beautiful poem. Not me, but my ex. Her family owned a retail business and was fairly wealthy. At some point, I think the number I was given was about 30 million. I repeatedly suggested that they set some money aside. I'm not an expert, but small businesses can go under in the blink of an eye, and it just made sense that they put away some savings just in case. Every time I brought it up, I was told that I was being stupid, and that real business owners don't save anything. They invest all of their earnings back into their business. Eventually, I stopped bringing it up so they'd stop making me feel like poop for being concerned. And eventually after that, our relationship ended. Last I spoke to her, they were in the process of losing everything. The rise of online retail had absolutely ruined them. I mean, it might be true that businesses themselves don't keep a lot of cash around, but that is different from the personal finances of the owners. They should have been more responsible so that they weren't personally broke if the business went south. My dad had a stroke, and the complications from that, the medical bills, and my mother becoming his caretaker led us to eventual homelessness over the course of 5 years. This was in the late 90s to early 2000s. By the time I was 18, we had almost no assets because of the medical costs. I became a teacher and am now lower middle class and working toward middle class. My wife works for a non-profit which helps people attain financial stability. My dad had a stroke too, 3 years ago. I'm 17 now. Me, my 2 siblings, and my mom take care of him. We spent every savings we had for dad, but still, mom works very hard to treat us without a change. Love you, mom. I grew up rich. I wouldn't say I'm poor, but I don't live near as well as my parents. I grew up in a house which Zillow has now valued at $5 million in a very wealthy area. My mom never worked. My dad had an office and employees, and besides my mom, 3 ex-wives. My grandmother and great-grandfather came from extreme wealth. And really, it just turned out that my dad, though he was pretending for years to run a business, have an office and be a big important person, never actually made any money. All of it was drawn from a trust that had been set aside for him, and finally when it went dry, it was over. When my parents passed, I inherited about $13,000. Meh, that's life. I have 2 siblings that roam the earth thinking there's still something they can capitalize on from all this. Some privileged bank of connections they can make withdrawals from. But I've accepted that I'm just ordinary folk. Life doesn't owe me anything. I feel like my sister is the same. She acts like there is some privileged piñata that's going to bust open for her one day soon, and it's tragic. She hasn't taken responsibility for her finances yet, and she's 50 with 2 kids. It's become really... Until I was 10, my family seemed to have an ideal life. Beautiful houses in a very wealthy beachfront town, expensive cars, summer camps, and everything else a kid could want. My dad was a dentist and my mom was just starting work as a real estate broker. She said her money was fun money, dad paid the bills. But, unbeknownst to us, dad didn't pay the bills. He was living a double life with our babysitter. They even had their own house. My parents split and weeks later, the bank took our house. We, my mom and us 3 kids, were out on our butts. My dad has taken whatever was left of the money, not much, and destroyed my mom's credit with bankruptcies and delinquencies she didn't know about. We struggled for many years and had lots of help from family friends. There were many birthdays and holidays with no gifts and lots of pasta for dinner. My mom could stretch $1 pretty well since she had grown up with not much money. Now, 30 years later, my mom has become successful financially through lots of hard work. My dad is still with my old babysitter. He retired. He was forced to sell his practice because of loads of bad business practices and is now working a minimum wage job and living near poverty. Karma's a jerk. Do you know anyone who grew up rich but then turned out poor? Let us know in the comments below for a chance to be featured in an upcoming video. Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more from the library. See you soon!